I'm curious how that works with distance with our people that are out of Seattle.
That's me. And we did 6-hour Skype meetings, 4-hour Skype meetings. We did meetings with the client where I was on Skype. One meeting, the first meeting with the client, and this is all, the rest of them are live, and the first time around it didn't work to be on Skype, and I was on phone. And then I was able, through the grace of our leadership, I got to fly in and be in our final meeting. So that was really great. But it worked great, and I definitely would say that working with clients, it helps to educate around virtual work so that they're familiar and comfortable with it, because not every company is, and I expected that they would be.
Well, I was going to, piggyback on that a little bit in terms of, I guess there's a presumption that the consulting engagements and our individual consulting projects are going to be successful. They have to go a certain way. And it's, I think, equally valuable if they don't go the way you thought, and there's anxiety around that. There's tremendous learning in that anxiety space. I mean, and trying to kind of connect the dots that were invited. You know, my area of focus was about conversations that mattered. So my first chance to try this out with our consulting team was with a company that was sort of a happy, warm, fuzzy company that didn't really have any conversations that mattered.
Didn't want to.
In my opinion. And it mattered to them, and that says more about me than it does about them, in terms of what my expectation is for certain things. And the most recent individual project, which actually Susan and I did together, had important conversation written all over it. It's around the Hanford cleanup. And through a lot of engagement over the last couple of months, I realized I'm bumping up against my tolerance for conversations that are really important, held by people who are really stuck and really unclosed to any of the things we learn to do here that would help them kind of loosen up a little bit. So then I got myself questioning, so how much do I care about how much does the conversations that matter relate with who's having the conversation?
Go ahead, Lee, and then let's move into our OSR project.
So for the consulting project, there was specific about, you're learning about flawless consulting about Peter Block, right? I mean, there is a intent about learning that. And then the second thing was, it's an opportunity to learn about team dynamics and teaming. And actually, I don't know if you guys had that experience. For me, is how well you work with your team reflects how you can intervene with the clients. And in fact, how we were working really well, and that it reflected in the system. I mean, the client saw that they wanted that. Like we were modeling for them, that they don't get to see often or something. So I just want to make sure that that was a key piece for me. Out of how we work well is how we then will do well with the client.
Well,
I don't know. You can say that. That's what I'm saying. I don't know about others, but I'm speaking about, from my experience when we work with Boeing.
And that's the biggest thing I got out of our project. I think the way we worked together was just the biggest learning for us, and for me personally. And that, well, it had nothing to do with my area of focus. It still doesn't. But and I never wanted to
Did
do
you guys
that.
go through storming to get to
We had a little. Yes, we had lots of storming. There was, and it wasn't just the beginning. It was the middle and the end. But there was
the whole project
the
is full of storms.
storm clouds everywhere.
So I'm going to move us into talking about the OSR project, and specifically maybe say a few words on how you chose your project, briefly, as much as you can, what your project was, and then how that affected or influenced what you came out with as an area of focus. Particularly if anybody had a real change in area of focus through the work of their OSR project.
I think I already touched on that.
Yeah.
I'm realizing I have some limits and boundaries around where I'll go with client systems.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think I'm the only person who carried over from the consulting project in the fall through to my senior, my senior project. I'm getting out of the project. Did I say that? And it was interesting because my area of focus is, again, is that transformational learning and aesthetic ways of, how can I bring that into it? And I had a very sort of literal idea of how that would be, and Brian's being another area, an aspect of aesthetics in terms of space. We learned fairly quickly that just wasn't going to work at Hanford. But what was interesting is when you think about the bleakness of what Hanford Cleanup is all about, bringing any kind of aesthetic value is really important. So little teeny little things that I wouldn't have even imagined would be measurable were measurable and were noteworthy. And so I had a different experience of learning than I was imagining it was going to look like. And for us, this is the project that keeps going because it's continuing to go. And the thing that we've been working up to, the event, is actually in about 10 days. So we're going to be a part of that. And it'll be interesting to see, because I think you may have a shift from what you're thinking, and you may not, from that experience.
What do you think?
Good chance. We'll get into relationship issues.
So, based on what you just said about
Being
stuck people.
grumpy about stuck people.
Yeah, so it may still be the hold, and it may shift.
Yeah. I mean, I get it.
Are you helping, just to get a little more clarity, are you helping to facilitate?
No, we're part of the design team and we're supporting, but it is not our work, it is theirs.
Learning.
That's a really important thing to learn.
Yeah.
Maya.
When I finished my theory paper, and up until the point where I was actually diving into my OSR project, my area of focus was still fairly non-committed. I think maybe I was still afraid of failing, and so I was just looking at that intersection of transformational learning and at-risk youth, and unwilling to put a stake in the ground as to what that really meant. And my project was, and it's still actually, I have one last engagement on Monday night. I'm doing 6 weeks of work with the girls at Echo Glen Detention Center, doing creative work with them, 90-minute sessions. We've done art, we've done music, we've done poetry, we've done a variety of things, all strengths-based, values-based work, really them looking at what they have to offer the world, and it's been incredibly well received. And what I've discovered in that process is that I could actually put a stake in the ground as a mentor, as somebody who actually understands what that means to mentor youth that are at risk, and that I could put that on my certificate and say that's what I focused on, and the work has kind of channeled in that direction. And it really wasn't until after I stepped into the work and said, wow, this really works and I can do this, that I was able to claim it. So we did that, what I claim as mine, in our papers, and yet I really wasn't so sure I was claiming it, but I hadn't witnessed it. I read it and believed it, but witnessing it was a huge piece of that. So.
Anyone else want to share their?
Well, go ahead.
I was just, the time estimate, I really wanted to know when I was in your spot, how long a theory paper would take. So it wasn't more than 5 to 10 hours a week for me, but I jumped right on it in the beginning. And I got 22 books, it was bigger than my son, and it was wonderful. I loved every minute of it, so it was my favorite part. But it was at least 5 hours a week, but not much more. And it ramped when you got towards the end, of course. The A3 right.
So I have a question. Have any of you changed completely the direction you were going when you did your project? So you're going into it thinking, I want to be, let's just say, an OD consultant, and then your project just so happens to be working with children, and you realize, oh my gosh, I love this, and you completely change at that point in the program?
I mean, my premise changed, but not my area of focus. So, but my premise of what I wanted to accomplish in my OSR project totally shifted. Like, oh, this isn't it at all. But it was still, keeping on the topic was still really important to me. But it started here, like, oh, I want to accomplish this. And it really moved way over here, but still in the same field. But it really shifted.
Could you say a little bit more about what this is?
Over here. Can you see it? So I did a personal one. So it was an OSR project that took